Hello, it's August 4th, 2022, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer Meeting. We get together every week to talk about development activity in the Backdrop community. My name is Nate Lampton from Oakland, California. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet, and I am a core committer for the project. I'm joined here by several of the regulars. We'll do some introductions here. If we could go to Tim and then Robert.
My name is Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim on the internet. That's all.
Thanks, Tim. Robert and then Jen.
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet, coming to you from Altadena, California.
Thank you, Robert. Jen and then Justin.
Jen Lampton on the internet, joining from Oakland, California.
Justin, if you're available.
Yeah. Justin Christofferson, just outside Denver, Colorado.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Oh, and we have a late joiner. We're just wrapping up introductions, Herb. If you if you want to say your name and where you're from, then now's the time. Sorry, we totally sprung that on you. Literally joined right at the end of introductions. Okay, maybe later. We're also joined by Herb Duel on the internet. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so let's see. Jen, do you want to do the Contrib update?
Sure, if I can remember to unmute myself. Sure, so this week we have 3 new contributed modules with official releases: collapse block, views block, exposed filter block, and nice messages. So thank you everybody for continuing to release projects. And as Nate mentioned before we started the video, there are a whole bunch more that recently got transferred into the Backdrop Contrib group that don't yet have official releases, but a lot of great activity going on in Backdrop Contrib right now.
Excellent, thanks, Jen. Okay, let's see, we'll go into the general discussion part of the meeting. We have a forum post that kind of guides these discussions every week. It's forum.backdropcms.org under events and meetups. There's a thread there where we solicit ideas for discussion or topics that need some feedback. And let's see, we'll go through them here. One of the issues raised was that upgrading to 122 version of Backdrop, there was a funny set of consequences where there was a bug that views include files weren't being included all the time. And so we fixed that bug in 122.1. But then it caused a problem in a popular module meta tag, that meta tag had defined the same function in 2 places, and now suddenly that second place was starting to be included, whereas previously it wasn't. And so I don't feel bad about fixing the module, but it is an unfortunate thing where it's like things aren't supposed to break, but meta tag isn't supposed to have the same function in 2 places either. So yeah, it just kind of exposed a bug in meta tag is what happened. Well, anyway, the good news is that we got a new release of meta tag out this past week to solve that issue. So if you're facing that problem, or if you haven't upgraded to 122 yet, it's a good idea to upgrade meta tag module first before you do your core update, and that will sidestep that particular problem if you're using meta tag.
Nate, what happens if you don't? If you do the upgrade first, you have.
What may happen on some page loads is that you'll get a white screen of death. And so if you have PHP errors turned on, you'll see that you'll get an error saying function meta tag views API has already been defined, I think is the function name, or it's something views something, meta tag views something. And yeah, so you can see that in your PHP error log, but if you're just getting a white screen, that's probably what it is. You can also confirm that in your error log.
And you think if you just update the module, then that'll fix it? It won't hurt the database. You're not going to have to revert.
Nope,
No.
doesn't hurt the database. It's literally, yeah, it's just a temporary thing. Or if you're really in a panic, we had some people just go into the meta tag module. It doesn't matter which one you change. If you just delete one of the two functions where the same thing is defined in two places, that will work. And there's only one function inside of the meta tag views.inc file. So if you just like delete that
Delete the
file
file.
or comment out that one function that's in there, then that will temporarily fix it. But I think for a lot of people, like if they get a white screen, they're not going to know what went wrong, and so
Right.
that's a frustrating experience. All right. Yes, that at least is fixed. That's great. Yeah, I've been on a little bit of a Contrib adventure this week because this is not on the agenda, but I'm just excited about it. I started my first backdrop paid project this week, and the very first thing is like getting all these modules that they had on Drupal 7. Justin did a huge amount of the initial work on this same project. I'm not sure if we can talk about the project until it's done, but yeah, it's going great. And a side effect of this was that there's like some small issues like this meta tag one that cropped up, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to help with that. And Jen's the maintainer of meta tag, so I got approval from her to work on meta tag module, and then I had an issue with XML sitemap, and then Laren's the maintainer of that, and he gave me permission to work on that. So we got a new release of XML sitemap this week too. Anyway, it's been great. I'm so excited. It's like the first time I've enjoyed work in like years.
Oh yeah, Nate is so happy. It is great. I'm just like, oh my gosh, he's like getting work done, and he's like working like past 5 o'clock in the evenings where I'm like, what's going on? Where we previously was like, no more meetings, I'm leaving, I hate meetings, and now he's like, coding is fun. It's great.
Yeah.
I found a fatal error in the new release of XML sitemap, but I've already filed a pull request against it. So
oh no, is it something?
It's okay. It only shows up if you're using Drush.
Oh.
All of your Drush commands will fatal though.
It's not a new regression. It's just an existing issue.
It did not have this problem before the latest release.
Oh, that sounds like a regression. That's unfortunate. Okay.
That I'm aware of.
All right, I'll take a look at that too.
Okay.
Let's see. Sorry, there's one more thing on my little escapade into actual backdrop site development. I've been trying B because of Backdrop Live, and that's been a really pretty pleasant experience using B. I wrote a documentation page for using B in combination with DDEV. It's in the B project wiki. Works great. That's about all I have to say about that. But it is nice that using a tool like DDEV Orlando, it can be very convenient because you don't need to be inside of a particular directory. Like if your web directory is nested inside of your project, you can just use B at the parent root without going into the web directory using either DDEV or Orlando. It's nice. Okay, sorry, I'm getting way off track. Let's see. Jen, you had an issue that you mentioned in the forum. Issue 4029, user compare visibility rule. Can you introduce that issue?
Sure. So
what's
I
going
gave
on with it?
a summary on this issue about a month ago, and I asked for feedback because I redid the user interface for it and haven't gotten any yet. So it's just another request. But essentially, this is a feature that existed in Drupal 7, and when we moved all of these visibility conditions to Backdrop, it was excluded. There's a very common use case is where you want to know if somebody's looking at like their own profile page or someone else's profile page, and you might want to show a different layout in those scenarios or a different block. So for example, if you have a public profile, I want to go to it, I might want to see things that I don't want to be public on that page. And the visibility conditions in panels the interface was really bad. It was like user 1, user 2, and it was really hard to tell which one was user 1 and which one was user 2. And so I redid the interface for Backtrap, where I assumed that user 1 is always the authenticated user, and you just say, is it the authenticated user or is it not the authenticated user? And it, rather than having to define which one was which and whether they matched or not. So the visibility condition has a sort of a more custom interface that it limits the scope of what it can do, but it meets the majority use case. And I think people having like 2 users, neither of which is authenticated, is sort of a rare edge case. And I don't necessarily think that needs to be supported in core. So I think that having the cleaner user interface to define what you're probably trying to do is better than a more generic user interface. It's really hard to figure out what you're trying to do. And there was a lot of good feedback in there in terms of what we might be able to do with the interface, but because I was working with the interface that's provided by the layout condition system, I couldn't do it quite the way it was requested. So I tried to do my best, but I would love to have some more feedback on what that actually looks like and if it makes sense to people to try and place a block that's only visible to myself on my own page. And so I think there's some good steps for testing on there too. And I would just want to know if people like it and if they think it's perhaps a good candidate for a future core version release at some point, new feature release like this. And if so, if it needs tests.
Yes. Looks great though. Taking a look at it now, it yeah, I like the concept simplification quite a lot. And what happened? One thing that immediately pops out to me. What happens if there's no other user contexts? Like if there's only the logged in user context, which is probably pretty common.
There is currently a bug in Backdrop Core that will let you use a visibility condition that requires 2 user contexts, but there's also a fix for that that Alejandro has been working on that will actually check if your required contexts are required and will only show you things that are available if you have the matching number of required contexts. So that's a core bug that should be fixed and not related to this particular issue. But if you're on a node layout and you don't have any additional author context added, you won't see this option. And if you add the author to the node layout, then it will be available with that fix.
Cool. Yeah, I'd say maybe in the meantime, because you can add the context right now, even though there's no valid option, just gracefully handle that situation and like display a message or something like that in the form saying this context requires, or this visibility condition requires an additional user context or something.
And add
like
that to the layouts module.
It should
So
be
it'll work for
in
all.
this condition, like when you add, because you can add it now even if there's only one user.
Right, but that works for every condition that requires contexts right now. Because it's a bug in layouts, it doesn't have anything to do with this condition. There's like, we have this concept of required contexts that aren't actually required. And so
yeah, well, it does at least check that there's one
context of the required type.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it won't ever show you node contexts if you don't have a node to work with. But the problem is there's always a user context because of the logged in user.
Yeah, that's how we found the bug.
Right. Yeah. So just when you add this visibility condition, if there's
why don't we just commit the other fix first?
Oh, okay.
We don't have to add code to core. I mean, it's already got a working pull request.
Okay. Well,
let's just fix the bug. Should I link
you just said
issues
don't merge my issue until that other issue is merged, which could put a pretty big delay in things.
No. It's a good. We've got both of them are fixed. I think it'll be fine, and I think Alejandro's fix is also really good. So I think let me just go link them together. And
what? I was gonna ask what issue number that one is, but
let me pull it. I don't have it handy. Let me go grab it.
Okay. Great.
Wait, I do have it handy. It's 4594. Yes, having lots of open tab space.
Okay, 4594 blocked by 49. I forgot.
4594. Here, I can drop the link.
4594. 94. Okay.
I'll just add a note into the description of the top issue.
Yeah, this is great. Also related to the previous issue 4029, the user compare visibility. Do you want to be an advocate for that? I don't think you're an advocate
Sure.
for anything else yet, and that'll
I
move
am
into
currently an
Yeah.
advocate for field group.
Oh yeah, field group functionality.
Yeah, but this is almost in a near ready state anyway, so it might not need an advocate if someone else decides it's good enough.
Okay. Great. All right. All right. The last item that we've got in the agenda, or in the from the forum this week, is issue 1602, layout paths, an issue that Robert has been working on for the past several weeks or months even, that expands the way that you can specify paths on which a layout is applied. That's one sentence version, but Robert, yeah, I'd love if you could talk about this issue. I'm not sure if it needs a demonstration, but yeah, there's a lot of, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it's pretty easy to see what it does. So yeah, I'll let you take it away, and we can talk about,
Okay.
the questions that you might have.
Yeah, so as you said, the basic idea is it's the title of the issue is not precisely this, but it's sort of the issue has evolved into this. I'd like to be able to apply a layout to more than one menu router path, to more paths than are listed in the single path field for the layout. And there's been a bunch of discussion, a couple different proposals in PR. The version that I've been advocating and have a PR for adds a new field to the layout called URL paths. And it behaves very much like the URL path field of a visibility condition, in that you can use asterisks as wildcards, and it works for both normal paths and alias paths. But whereas for visibility conditions, those conditions act to narrow the applicability of a layout, the URL paths field of a layout expands the applicability of a layout to include paths that match those conditions. And one other condition, which is unique to layouts, which is that the load functions need to match. And that, unfortunately, is a very subtle and deeply buried issue, but it's basically necessary, because suppose you have the path node/% and the path user/%, and you want to use a layout on both. And so you are presented with, let's say, user 10. But your path is user/10, but a node/% layout wants to load node 10 from that argument 10. It wants to load a node. And so the additional requirement is, if there are load paths for the layout and for the request path, they have to match in order to use the layout. Last week, we discussed this issue at the design meeting. We came to the conclusion, sort of tentative conclusion then, of saying, let's not deal with that problem. Let's not allow this new layout thing to work for paths that have placeholders in them. And so we wrote that in the comments, and we almost immediately got feedback saying, no, this was from, I think, RG Piano, saying, no, this is the situation that I want to use this on, where they do have placeholders. And if there's no load path discrepancy, there's no problem. So we can use it, and it works swimmingly if there's no load path discrepancy. So I put that back in. But then I got to thinking, this is, to explain this in use, it needs documentation. There is some explanation in the PR when you know, description below that field. It's got a toggle expansion to give you even more description below that field. But really, the whole thing should be documented. And so in my last comment on the issue, I posted a link to what I would propose as the documentation page, the draft documentation page, to go on docs.b.org that explains this feature and paths in general. And so what I'm kind of asking people at this point is for two things. And we'll see the hand, Jen, so I'll wrap up. I'm asking for two things. One is, are there use cases that, because I gave in the documentation example of several use cases, are there use cases that you would use, but that aren't addressed by this now? You know, so we can try to cover the 80% of possible use cases. And the second thing is, does that documentation make sense to you? So that's kind of my request at this point. And Jen, you're the hand up.
Thanks. So I raised my hand because I wanted you to finish, but I also didn't want to forget. So I thought that would help both of us. First of all, do you have a link to that documentation somewhere? The one in the issue, every time I click it, it tries to download a file. I don't know, that might be my browser's problem.
It's a markdown document. So yeah, it'll download, but then open it in whatever your favorite markdown reader is.
Nate sent me a link.
Yeah, I threw it into a gist.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
So that it renders.
Okay, I thought that might have been in my browser problem. Okay, and then the other thing I was thinking is that part of me feels like if we can't build an interface for this that can't be used without additional documentation, then we probably shouldn't put it in core. But that doesn't mean we can't build an interface for it. And sometimes, Robert, the act of just writing out the documentation like this might just make something clear that we can add to the interface for it. But my first instinct is like, if this is so complicated, that especially having the like multiple contexts needing to match thing, that feature could be excluded from core, and we just say a Contrib module could add that. And then that way we're not burdening everybody with a backdrop site with needing to just figure out that concept in order to get a layout done. I don't know what Alejandro's use case was, so I'll go back and read the issue and see what that is. But I don't know, the way that we have to solve the problem now with like multiple layouts, even if they're identical, it could be, you know, that's the solution we recommend for people if they don't want to add the Contrib module. But we also already have Contrib modules that can do this. And I think if we add more support for this feature in core, that should just make it even more possible to have that kind of extension. But yeah, I wonder if his use case meets the 80% requirement to have, because I don't know how many paths there are in core that have a word followed by percent, where that percent is going to be the same for more than one thing. Like we don't have that in core. So the fact that he has to have a Contrib module to even create a use case where that exists seems like adding support for that into core might not be valid. But let me go read his comments because I haven't read that yet.
So the use case where it comes up is when in views. If you create two views with different view paths that each take contextual filter arguments, and you want to use the same layout on both, that can't be done currently in core, and it can be done with this field.
Okay.
And I would also say, a way you phrased it, you said it can't be used without going to a documentation page. I think it can, and the most common use cases, I hope, are obvious just from the user interface. But there's sort of power and depth, and how to do those extra power and depth things are what's described in the documentation. So I'll say I totally agree
Yeah.
that it should be discoverable just from the UI. But if you there's a phrase in the documentation, deep dive, that's used for some documentation pages, and that's kind of what this is. If you want to, really do extra stuff.
Yeah, like
But
views
for most
contextual
cases,
filters, right? That's a perfect parallel.
I'm
Like,
sorry?
so views contextual filters, right? So it's like a perfect parallel because that's a deep dive in views, and doing the same thing here would be a deep dive in layouts. Okay, well, let me go look at it. I want to go read the comments because I'm not sure. My what's it called when your hair stands on end? When you said that, I was just like, oh, I don't know. This sounds like it'd be really bad. But I haven't seen the use case, and I haven't seen the interface specifically now that it's been fixed for that. So let me go look at all of it, and I'll see what we think. But yeah. Also, Yorkshire Pudding is not here right now to say this again, but he did say in the last meeting, I just wanted to get this on record for everyone here, that after reading your documentation, he understood layouts so much better than before. And so I think that's also really valuable, just to have people who might be struggling with the concept of layouts because it's so different from Drupal, to have a resource like that. So I do also just want to say thank you for taking the time to write out documentation that helps educate people who we already consider experts. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, I'd like to walk through this a little bit more, Robert. If it's okay, I'll share my screen and we can show kind of what this looks like. So this is the issue. Here we go. So this is the main issue. This is the original description, and then here's the documentation page that we're discussing. It's in a markdown file, but then we can also go look at the sandbox. So I've already logged into the sandbox here, and I'll add a new layout. Oh, I already started. One thing, let's see, how do I, feels kind of weird doing this, like I need to cancel. We want to start all over. Okay, here we go. Too helpful. Okay, so let's say, sure, we want to do posts. And so we want to say like node/%. Context pops up. And this is the new field. And yeah, so I'm not sure if node/% is the best example because I need something else that took a node. I guess maybe like node/%/edit or something like that, or maybe something that was like comments or something that was a tab under node would probably work as a possible thing. Just out of curiosity, how does this deal with admin paths versus front end paths? Like if you have a primary path that's front end and a secondary path that's back end, what happens there?
It doesn't distinguish between whether something has the word admin in it. I mean, so yeah, you could use the same layout on a public facing and on an admin page.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, fine. Yeah, why not? I don't. It would just be a little bit strange, perhaps. But yeah, I don't see why there's any reason why you couldn't do that. I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
I would say that might be a better match to the experience people. It's more like like if you hit edit on a page and you would expect like everything on that page to be editable, it might make more sense if you had the same layout on the front and on the back. So I think there's like a use case for having the same layouts, even if the theme is different. Having all of the stuff in the same place could still be really valuable for people.
Yeah.
So I'm just noticing that Nate used a placeholder, and the first comment below that says don't use placeholders.
Oh yeah, that's right. So you shouldn't actually you should use a % if you were trying to do what you're entering.
You mean an asterisk? You should use it.
Excuse me, an asterisk. Yeah.
Oh.
And in fact,
I should.
Actually, that's a good point. There probably should be validation to make sure that you don't include a placeholder.
Well, Well, I don't know. I mean, I think like conceptually, like Nate's on the right path here, saying like if the percents need to match, that's what needs to be added.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying. Like the loaders have to match. So,
Yeah, and if
but
it's an asterisk, there's no guarantee there's a loader at that location, so there's nothing to match. Just like conceptually.
yeah, but you could do like this. This would definitely this would work to get the edit
Everything.
path as
Yeah.
well. Well, what I'm kind of agreeing with Jen here on a couple of things. That this is like you know, like contextual filters in views. That this is like an advanced concept. And one thing I think that we could drastically improve. I think for working on this interface is fine, but we could drastically improve this by lowering its visual importance on the page. Like instead of you know, having it be a field that is always here, perhaps there's like another plus thing below primary path that's like add additional path or something like that, that pops up a modal saying, hey, you know, add an additional path, and then it puts the help here and it validates maybe on a per path basis, you know. So you type in one path and it's like, oh no, hang on, that path isn't correct. And then you do one path at a time rather than, you know, having a big text area that all of them need to be validated all together. And that would kind of hide the complexity and put it in a place where it's like it's only seen by the people that need it potentially.
So what would you think of just putting it in a collapsed field set rather than as a modal? Because the thing is that what's nice is when it comes up, if you open an existing layout and you have fields there, you'd like to see them.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, well, it should work kind of like context where, you know, if I add another context, oops, right. If I add another context, it shows up, right? But it would do the same thing, but like below the path field, potentially.
I like that. I also really like the idea of the individual validation, because I think like if people are struggling with the concept, if you have to enter them one at a time and it's like, no, don't do that right, then the second time you're going to get it right because you got the feedback the first time, rather than entering like 10 paths incorrectly and then, yeah.
Yeah, I also kind of, well, I guess one thing that's nice about the current approach, or maybe good or maybe not, but you know, if you were to change this at some point to something else, let's say I did change this to user, you know, like context already does the work here. Oh, it looks like my URL paths actually got wiped out by that change.
Yes.
Which is kind of what I wanted, because now they're invalid, you know, because the loader changed. So, but it also
yeah, but
was a
you
little
lost
unexpected.
all your data. You don't know what pages they're supposed to work on.
It got wiped out because you changed the primary path to a
Different
layout
context.
created page path, and we don't allow URL paths for layout created pages because we only allow URL paths for pages that override, like what you see now.
What? Isn't that the opposite of what we want?
No.
I definitely want one layout to cover modules, themes, and layouts, 3 standalone pages, but I could never imagine having one layout that works for path with a context.
So you want to create a layout. I mean, you want to make it, well, you can't, because layout created pages don't have main content blocks, and override pages do.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, Jen, if you made a new page, a new layout, and there was nothing on it, and you placed all the blocks. Why would you want that same layout in multiple? Oh, because you could have visibility rules on them, I guess.
Or just have 3 different views in the body area, one for page 1, one for page 2, one for page 3, and then I don't have to worry about the 18 other blocks that are identical across all 3 of those pages. This is for backedupcms.org, right? The only difference is the one block in the middle of the page, and everything else on the page is identical. And so I want, and all of those views are it's just a placed block. There's nothing special about it.
Yeah, what this would work for your use case as long as you used pages for those views. So if you used views to create each one of those pages and then
But they're just
applied the layout to
blocks.
them. Oh, but they're just blocks. Yeah, so it wouldn't work in that arrangement. But it would work if they were all three of those things were pages and they
You mean
created their
nodes?
own paths.
Or views pages.
Yeah, views
Yeah,
pages.
I don't use
Yep.
views pages anymore because I use layouts instead. So yeah, interesting. But so now you're saying, have we removed this feature from standalone pages entirely?
Well, yeah. I
Does
guess
work.
It
Because
doesn't.
a week ago we were
doesn't-
talking about removing it from any page with a context and only having it for standalone pages, and now it's the
No.
opposite.
No. Last week, it's always only been for override pages. What we removed it for, there's a difference between override pages and dynamic pages. Dynamic pages are the things with placeholders. That's what we removed it from in the meeting last week.
Okay.
And when I put it back. So it works for both static and dynamic pages, but only for override layouts.
So like you'd have to have some page that already exists on your site, and then you can override, or like 8 pages that already exist on your site. You can override all of those with one layout, but you can't have 3 pages that are identical at the same path with one layout.
Even 3 pages that are identical with 3 different paths.
Right.
Right.
Sorry.
With one layout.
But
Yeah.
did someone say
Yeah,
that
you
worked
can.
already?
Yes, you can.
I thought that worked already with layout wildcards.
Yeah, that would actually be just generally, Robert, how does this differ from layout wildcards, which is a Contrib module?
Yeah, so it allows the URL paths to be either a normal path or an alias, and it enforces the load function rule. And I'm not sure I don't remember what layout wildcard does about load function rules.
Would this entirely supersede layout wildcard? Like, would layout wildcard have any purpose after this?
Well, apparently, if you can't
Probably
have 3
not.
layouts.
Well, it wouldn't, because there's layout wild. So one difference is, because this works for both normal paths and aliases, and layout wildcard only works for normal paths, one could conceive of a use case where you didn't want it to work for an alias that matched. So they're not identical. That's one issue. The other thing is layout wildcard does something else that has no correlation here, which is what in layout wildcard is called ancestor matching, which is that if that's turned on, the layout will match if its path is any ancestor of the request path. And
isn't that just the asterisk, like admin/star,
no, because remember, stars can actually cover multiple. The ancestor matching is more restrictive than a star. Star can cover a lot more, because it could cover.
Oh, like it could, like this could actually do like all admin pages.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that starts to get pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Could do all advertisement nodes as well.
Yeah, everything that starts with AD.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All add exec user profiles. All additive categories.
Yeah, I wonder, one thing that I that I've always wondered about this particular issue is if the solution that is being put forward actually solves the original request, or if we're going to need to also solve the original request again, like in another way. So Jen, you actually made the original request, which is that the path field doesn't behave
Except you're an asterisk.
as you expect, and that continues to kind of be the case. Like this, like, you know, doing this, for example, doesn't work as you would expect, or even something more typical, like if you just did node slash star, you know.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is an asterisk, a true wildcard in that field could match a whole slew of different menu router paths. And each menu router path has different load functions which change what the automatically created contexts are. So, you know, so trying to allow for wildcards in that place means context, you know, every time you change the character there, I mean, you'd need multiple context sections for every possible interpretation of that field. I mean, so for example, if you put in star e slash star, well, that would match both node slash percent and it would match user slash percent, but the contexts are different. It would also match, you know, those
Taxonomy terms.
those terms, that have 4% in a row in the menu router path. And
yeah. I was thinking, and I don't remember, I think this was discussed way earlier in the thread. It's just sort of like translating. So if somebody types node slash percent, we would just rewrite, or node star, we just like rewrite that as percent and be like, we think this is what you meant. And like, we fixed it for you. So we could still add that to this neat, and it would solve the original problem and it wouldn't affect anything else. I think what I was envisioning.
Wait, can you rewind there for a second? What are you saying? That if you do this, it just fixes it for you and changes that to percent?
Yeah. It will be like, we think you meant this to apply to all content pages. And so what you meant was node slash percent, and we're just going to rewrite it. And that way it would have the affected behavior, but it wouldn't remain with a star there that could be interpreted dangerously like later on. You know, because what's still saved is node percent.
Yeah, we should probably do something that just like, if you type a star, like it doesn't do this. This will create a page at this path. Like I have no idea what would actually. Can you even have star in a path? Like I don't know.
Yeah. And then I think another thing that I was thinking about too is like, okay, if you create a layout and you just say, I want this layout, this configuration to apply on a second path. Right now, the only way you can do it is take the layout and hit clone and then put the second path in, but you end up with all of the information identical except for the path. So what I wanted was a second path field. So instead of saying path, it would say paths, and you can hit plus. And then that entire set of configuration would just apply to every one of those layouts. So rather than having to save the identical configuration 4 times, you only save it once, and now you just have multiple options in there. And I think that works as long as there's no contexts. But as soon as you add a context, that fails. And so that's what I was trying to get at last week, is that if we don't include contexts, you meet that use case and you don't have to worry about all of these other complexities. But like thinking it from a technical perspective, like the data is identical except for that field. So it made sense to build the interface to match that. But like, I think what we're getting at here is everybody has a different use case for this, right? Where some people want to just put an asterisk in this field, and some people want, you know, what I want, which is standalone pages that are the same. And some people don't want standalone pages. They want view pages that are the same. And some people want different contexts that are the same loader. And I'm not sure we can solve all those with the same solution. So Nate, this might actually be like 3 different issues that we're looking at here.
Right. Yeah, because even if we get this to a point where we effectively make it so layouts work on multiple paths and it covers all the use cases of, well, all of the use cases of layout wildcard and then a little bit more, then great. We've added a major new feature to core, but it's not actually solving at least the asterisk confusion. So I don't, yeah, maybe we just continue running through this to completion, and then file another issue when we're done, because it's not exactly clear how much scope we're going to get inside of this one issue.
Yeah.
So one of the requests I made in the last comment, and I think it's still valid after all of this discussion that we've had, is for people to post their use cases. Not saying I want to type in letters with asterisks and percents, but like, what's the scenario that you want to use a layout on? I have one layout that I want it to be both a standalone page, to create that page, but also be used on other paths of such and such form. So if people could post those use cases, then we could kind of look at whether this or something like it can be can satisfy that use case, or maybe for some use cases we say, well, we're not going to try to satisfy that one in core, and Contrib like layout wildcard should work for it. But it seems like if we can come up with something that works for 80% of the use cases people come up with that aren't currently accessible by layouts, then maybe it would be worth putting in.
Yeah, and I'll validate a little bit. Alejandro's request wasn't as crazy as it sounded when you described the situation. It's like 2 views that have the same arguments that you want to apply the same layout to. That doesn't sound that outrageous. Jen's situation also doesn't seem that outrageous, where she wants the same thing but set up differently, where the views are blocks instead of the views being pages. So that would be a pretty drastic expansion, Robert, where instead of restricting this to only overrides, if you said, I want to make up an entirely new path, there's not really a reason why you couldn't also do that. Like, when you save a layout and you make up a new path like this, it creates 2 config files, one for the layout configuration and then one for the menu item that controls like the menu item entry. If you added another one, like added foo and bar and baz paths, it could create 3 menu entries, like it could do that. That's not impossible, but it would be a pretty big scope expansion for this issue.
Yeah.
So I guess if let's say I create the primary path is foo, because I want to create a layout page at foo. But I want to use that same layout on all my node pages. So I give it the URL path of node/star.
Not supported in core.
Yeah, that part I think that I don't think that should be covered.
Yeah.
Create a new page and do an override at the same time.
Right.
Nope.
It's one or the other. Yeah. All overrides are all new pages. Yep.
Right. But I think though, I'll have to check this, but you could create separate layouts, layout pages for foo, bar, and baz, and then create a new layout whose URL paths are foo, bar, and baz, and give it a higher weight or a deeper weight. No, so a lower weight, so that it's tested first. So to override a layout created page with another layout.
Oh dear.
I think that's doable, but I'd have to check.
I think you're right. It scares me. I think you might even be able to
do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I just think that most people
That would just be really
don't do
confusing
that
later.
because,
Like, I'm editing foo. Why am I not seeing foo edit? What's
oh,
going
that
on?
sounds horrifying.
Well, wait, we have that button in the admin bar. We'll be totally fine. We can always find the layout now.
Yeah, that
We've
sounds like
fixed it.
another good validation thing that we should prevent that from happening.
Well, no, it's a feature. It's apparently the only way I can do what I need.
It will indeed let you do that. Oh no. Now I can add 2 pages.
Yeah.
Because, oh no. So wow, so this is actually two layouts at the same path. Wow. Didn't know you could do that. Yeah, sounds like some additional validation there. Yeah.
Well, I
Well,
mean, there are use cases for having 2 different pages at the different path, right? Like you can have like, this user's logged in, this user's logged out, and you can have completely different blocks for that. Some people would choose to do that with one layout with block visibility conditions, but other people might choose to do that with 2 layouts and layout visibility conditions. So I think like we need to be a little bit careful about adding like new validation to things people might actually be using legitimately. Just because it
Yeah.
seems like a bad idea doesn't mean it's not a feature that people are depending on.
okay. Well, sorry we
Oh
ran
my
through
goodness.
all of the
This is-
available time
It's
getting
a much
excited
bigger
about
issue
that.
than I thought it was.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. Like I mean, with the scope expansion of what you could possibly use it for. There's a whole separate conversation about this, Robert, about the performance implications of figuring out which layout should be applied. That makes me really nervous. That I haven't looked at it to see like how efficient it is, but I would suspect that we need to loop through every layout in the whole system every time there's any page load to figure out which one applies, which makes
But I
me
think we do
nervous.
that already.
We do it based on required context currently. So we're like, if you have a required context of node, we only check the node layouts with required context. We don't check all of the standalone ones.
I mean, but there is a line in the existing code to load all the configs for all layouts and loop through them.
Yeah, and there's some kind of, I think maybe it makes I can't quite remember how it does this. It does some kind of, it makes a map or something like that that's just like this path equals this layout, so it doesn't have to keep doing it. But I could, I'll anyway. That's a whole thing that
Yeah.
needs a look.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should just stop because I don't really remember how that works. Okay. Yeah. Well, we're all out of time for today. Before we close, we'll skip the 123 update because we don't have time for today. But since Herb joined us, I want to check, Herb, if you had anything you wanted to bring up or discuss before we exit.
Just entity reference. I saw that you commented on one of the items there.
Oh yeah, that was yeah. So entity reference. First of all, since this is the first time we've spoken, thank you so much. That's so amazing. Like I can't even hardly believe it actually. So yay, entity references in core. It'll be in 123, and we've got a lot of follow-up issues for it. And yeah, that one about file URI I just posted right at the beginning of the meeting. That maybe it was before we started the recording. That yeah, that issue, basically there's a bunch of people that think that it's ready, but nobody wants to mark it RTBC. Even I feel a little bit bad about marking it RTBC and then immediately merging it. But if you want to merge it, that's a possibility.
If you mark it, I'll merge it. Yeah.
Yeah, I already marked it. So I marked it at the beginning,
Okay.
but I said I wanted to wait another week just because like it's kind of it's an API break.
Yeah.
It's questionable, although with Alejandro's audit of existing use, I feel pretty good about it. Yeah, is there any other issues? I know separate out term reference. That looks like that's the next one that's ready for getting some review, 5633, because that has a pull request and is all kind of ready to go, it looks like. But
Yeah.
at this, yeah, I think that file entity one is kind of important that we get in 123 because it's an API break and it's a good time to justify the API break. Other stuff like separating out term reference or turning it on by default, I feel like there's not really a big hurry, and in some cases might even be better to like slowly separate things out, like so that people have time to adjust. But if it happens, I also won't be, upset about that. So
Yeah, I agree. Those other ones can wait.
okay. Anything else regarding entity reference? Okay. All right. Well, we're all out of time. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Thanks for the great discussion on layout pads. That was invigorating. Yeah, I hope everybody has a great day. So see you all next.